Howdy hackers, and welcome to another episode of Fairlight TV. It's going to be unique this time. I'm not saying this every time to ensure that I get your attention. This is actually really unique. The C64 scene was sort of formed back in the early 80s when the machine was launched in 81, 82. Depending on where you are, and when you can buy it in Europe back in early 82, it was a very small series that were sold, and eventually people started forming a scene. And talking to the people that were there forming the scene back then is rather rare, because a number of those made an impression during the time that they were involved in it, and then moved on to the next platform and the next platform. So if you look at the number of people sort of active today, most of them would have started after 1980, 86, 87, 88. And my assumption was that the people that were involved before that, they were the cutting edge people, exploring and pioneering the outskirts of kind of human knowledge. And then they moved on to the next platform and the next platform and the next platform to ensure that they were sort of exploring the edges. I'm fortunate today to be visited by Christian Lindeberg, Blackshadow of Fairlight. He was a very early computer owner. C64 wasn't the first computer he had. He had a number of computers before that. And he was also quite quick to move to the Amiga and establishing himself on the Amiga scene and ensuring that there was an establishment of an Amiga scene. And he was also, or he is, one of the two founding fathers of the group Fairlight. So I'm eternally grateful to Christian for all his efforts for the group and for the C64 scene and the Amiga scene. So I hope you would find this interesting, and this will be another 90 minutes of pure computer nostalgia with one of the guys who was there when it happened. So over to Christian. Oh yeah, there is one little thing. There was a bit of an issue with my internet connection during the recording, so the recording is fine, but sometimes there is a lag on the picture of Christian, and he's also, yeah, well, his camera wasn't the best, and the lighting wasn't the best, but I hope you can still enjoy it. Sound should be perfectly fine. It's just the visuals that are sometimes not top notch, but let's just say it was something that we did on the C64, and for being done on the C64, it's just great. Over to Christian. Howdy guys, I'm sitting here with Christian Lindeberg, whom you know as Blackshadow of Fairlight. We have dressed up differently. Christian has the Pink Floyd t-shirt. I'm in honoring Christian. I'm wearing my Malmö t-shirt because that is where Christian is at the moment. So we have three main topics to cover today, which Christian is uniquely equipped to help us with. One is the birth of the C64 scene, because Christian was there in the very early days before there was like a scene. He was also one of the two founding fathers of Fairlight. So if we would have our own Mount Rushmore, it would be two faces and one of them would be Christian's. And then he was also there to create the scene on the Amiga. So this is a quite unique experience of us having the opportunity of sharing the knowledge and wisdom and the touch of history that only Christian can bring. So let's start with the early days of the scene before there was a scene. So Christian, a little bit about yourself and how you got in contact with computers in the first place. I guess the C64 wasn't your first thing.
No, my first computer wasn't actually my computer, but my father worked with computers very early on. He even worked with the really early ones that you programmed with cables. I mean, the really old stuff. And in late 70s, 1977 to be exact, he brought the first computer home to us, and it was TRS 80, which was made by Tandy or something. I don't remember what brand, which later became, or a version, not a version, but the Swedish company Luxor based their ABC 80 on the TRS 80. So that's where it started, and it was just a very simple computer, but it was a computer with a screen, and it's where I started with basic, because back then you didn't have any programs. You had to make your own programs. You couldn't download, trade, or anything. If you wanted something to do with a computer, you'd have to either create the program or type it in from some computer listing, print out something. Then I had a Sinclair CX81, complete with the external memory and a small thermal printer, which used extremely expensive paper. And I only used that for a short while because, yeah, it sucked, to be honest. And moved on to the VIC-20 for a short while, and which later advanced to the Commodore 64, which was it's when everything fun began, because nothing was fun before that. Commodore 64 was the first really fun computer, but it all started out a bit earlier. I'm not sure when I got the 64, but 82, 83, whenever it was released. I remember it was expensive as hell, and luckily I had a generous father, so that solved that part. But I remember that the Commodore 64, when it was new, cost like 6,500 Swedish crowns, and the disk drive cost as much. And I don't want to think about converting that into current currency, because damn.
Yeah, I mean, it's a month's salary. It should be so.
Yeah.
It's really a lot. But I mean, you were very early seen as super knowledgeable about computer, and back being very, very young, you had your own column in Malmö-based newspaper Arbetet.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly where the ID came from, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was my father who initiated the ID, and then we talked to, I think, a few different magazines, and introducing me, and Arbetet was the one who decided this sounds like a fun ID, because no one else talked about computers in normal newspapers at that time, and much less programming, because a lot of those articles contained, like, it was just basic, but still it's programming. And especially for people who haven't used computers for anything else than just using them, it was their first step into actually doing some coding. And this column started 83 when I was 12. I'm born in 70, so I was becoming 30 in that year. I'm a late child in December. Yeah, it kept on for 10 years before they shut it down. And it was a weekly, every Saturday, with, I don't think it was during the summer or winter holidays, but overall a weekly article.
But I mean, it's just amazing. Could you imagine working for a magazine and then you contract a 12-year-old to write stuff for you? That's how did that work? I mean, I can't see that happen today. That will be really early days when there was nobody else who could do it, because normally you would want to get an adult, right?
And it was much easier then than now, because I mean, they didn't understand a shit of what I was talking about. So they, of course, they were impressed, and they had heard about computers, and they saw the market. They didn't understand at all what I was doing. They couldn't actually tell if what I've written as an article was any good or any useful. Everything they had to count on was the what others said who had read them and tried to understand. So they themselves, they didn't really understand, but they saw the potential of having this in their magazine. So it's
So,
much harder to do that thing today.
how did you actually do it? I mean, did you write it on one of the computers you had and send it in, or was it like print on paper and deliver? How was the distribution mechanism?
The process was actually to write it usually like you do even today. You start by getting ideas and writing down some comments on paper, but then it was written in a word processor of some sort. Don't ask me about that, I don't remember. And then it was printed on special paper, which was used back then, and which was normally used in typewriters, but luckily it could be used in the printer we had. And it was a special paper with a special formatting, and it should be special spacing, and there was lots of silly rules back then. So it was all done in paper format, then either sent to them or delivered to them to their HQ in Malmö. So it was done the old-fashioned way.
No modems.
No modems.
Cool. So we do have a picture of the 10-year anniversary, and so Torsten, pause us and just show the picture of the 10-year anniversary. I don't expect anybody to be able to read it because it's in Swedish, so it's more posting the fact that we have it here. So yeah, now we assume that Torsten has done it. So let's move on to more details on the C64. So of course, somebody would need the concept of handle wasn't really introduced very early, so people used their own names of sorts. So your first group was CL for Christian Lindeberg Cracking Company, and that was launched in 1984. Give us something on that.
Well, it's I'm not exactly sure who I got into hacking, but I think it actually started out earlier, as I talked with the TRS-80 and stuff, when you didn't have anything pre-made, so you got listings, program listings, and then you entered them, and then you modified them to work in different ways. And that's actually the basics of hacking right there. Just changing the basic code. So that's kind of how it started out, and then developed to assembly, especially later on. And I started to dabble on assembly on the VIC-20, but it wasn't until the 64 that I actually looked into it. And the reason I looked into it is because I started with BASIC on the 64 as well, but there were pretty early some compilers. Sure, they were crap, but understanding that compilers converted the BASIC to machine language, it got me interested in machine language, because of course it must be better to do it in machine language the first time, not have a compiler in between.
CL Cracking Company, you actually did crack a few games. CSDB, they are listing Flight Simulator 2, Gateway to Apshai, Beast's Quest for Tyre, and Pharaoh's Curse. So, I mean, it's quite clear that you didn't just do basic, that you needed to be able to do a bit more than just fiddling with basic there.
Yeah, actually, I remember some game, I don't remember if it was Gateway to Apshai, but it was some of the Epics game back then, was actually written in BASIC.
Mm.
When you loaded the program and wrote list, it said just Cs 2048 or something, but what it did was to move the basic pointer. So if you went in and made a small exit there, but allowed them to change the basic pointer, you could then write list and see the whole basic code. So actually, one of the games I cracked was actually cracked in BASIC.
Okay, yeah, that didn't take understanding machine code, but you still need to understand basic pointers, and then you're already on your way to doing quite complex stuff. Okay, anything more on CL Cracking Company?
No, not really. It was my first venture into cracking, and it was just because it was a fun thing to do.
Yeah. But and this is still just you. Did you have anybody like any friends in the area, or I mean, the concept groups isn't really here yet. It's just individuals having some sort of group name where they are the only one in the group. And I think I've seen that more. I mean, Mr. Z is the same. He was sort of a group and a person at the same time. So it would be something very similar.
Yeah, exactly. I had friends who dabbled, and we traded with discs via mail. But it was, I mean, I traded with, I don't remember his name, but I traded with one of the guys who later became a member in Triad. But way before he became, before Triad even existed. So there was a community, but it was a very small community, very tight knit, because most people didn't even have a 64. It was pretty rare for people to have a computer, and most of my friends, in real life friends, they had all different kinds of computers. Someone had an Apple, someone had a Micro B or whatever, microprocessor. So it wasn't until a year later, when more people actually had 64, that everything started to get more structured. But as you said, the early days, it was more for fun and to be able to give games to a friend. And they didn't actually spread very far at all. And usually it was that I had bought a game that I liked, and I want my friend to try it, so I had to crack it, because I didn't want to give him my original, because I wanted to play it. So it was just a thing of necessity to crack it, to be able to give it a copy of it to my friend. That's how it started. So it wasn't organized at all.
But, I mean, the Triad guy, whoever he was, how did you get in touch with them? I mean, there were no BBSs or any like forums or anything at the time. So how did you get to contact with the others?
The Triad guy was later in the after CLCC, but how it worked, like before trading actually was a big thing, was that you found someone locally who had found someone else, and then you get referred to each other. So there wasn't any concrete contact system. It was all by reference, and I trade with this guy, perhaps I can get him to trade with you as well, and stuff like that. So still, it was very unorganized, and most people who traded weren't related to any group whatsoever. They were just ambitious people who wanted to trade.
Okay, let's move to Saturn then. Saturn Cracking United. Again, that sounds like a group, but it's still just one guy, and it's the one we have in front of us.
Yeah, exactly. It's still just me. But I felt, after doing the first CLCC for a while, that it sounds pretty lame, which it does. So I wanted to, because then things had started to happen. Groups like Wasp had started to merge, to exist, and I'm not sure if original West Coast Crackers existed when I changed to Saturn, but it was still, it was early, but groups had started to form, and I felt I need a better name. And one of my friends, actually an old Fairlight member, the Wiz, a musician and also made graphics, he thought Saturn was a cool name and thought about some way to use it. And then I stole it from him and called myself
Oops.
Saturn because he
Oops.
never used it. We're still great friends, so
Yeah.
it's not a big deal. But so he came up with a name and I borrowed it without asking. And then named myself Saturn Cracking United for a bunch of releases, just to have a better name.
Okay, so we will sort of slide into Wasp here, but so you were Saturn, and the group name was then Saturn Cracking United, and then you joined Wasp as Saturn, and there are releases from you under Wasp which says Saturn, but you changed to Galahad when you basically, well, quite freshly into Wasp.
Yeah, everyone else in Wasp had medieval England names like Ivanhoe, King Arthur, Lancelot, De Bracy. So Saturn didn't really fit the theme of the group. That's why I changed to Sir Galahad.
Cool. So you also name dropped a number of people, and these are people I am also happily admitting that I know. Ivanhoe. We actually worked together in Mast, Memory and
Yeah.
Storage Technology, which was a shop, and I guess Roger was the one owning the shop, as far as I understand.
Yeah, it was Roger and Frederick.
And Frederick was who? Is that the Frederick Patrick cracking service guy?
He was never really that active, but I don't know if he was what he was called. I don't remember. He just did some minor things for fun. He knew how to program, he knew assembly and lots of other stuff, but he never was really involved in any serious computer hacking, cracking things. He just did things for fun. So I don't even remember what he called himself. But it was those two who started Mast in a basement in Malmö, where they imported their big thing they started with was importing memory for the Amiga 500, the ones you plug in from below. That was made in Australia, I think. The main Mast company was based in, and then sold them in Sweden. And that was pretty early in the, when considering back then, companies in Sweden only sold the big official brands, not third-party brands. So that's why Mast made its pretty fast advancement to be able to sell that memory a lot cheaper than the official Commodore Amiga 500 memory.
No.
So that's how it started anyway.
Again, so Ivanhoe was Roger. Well, just and we're now more into name dropping, which I kind of enjoy. So sorry if you don't enjoy that, anybody watching. But he was also playing for the band Nasty Idols, which was sort of a skunk rock kind of
sleaze rock.
Something I would say like Twisted Sisters, but
Yeah,
would that be a fair comparison?
Yeah, sort of. The genre exists and it's called sleaze rock back then, and he was a part of it from start, but I think he dropped out after the second album. I'm not sure. It was pretty early anyway. But I remember, and perhaps you do too, I'm not sure exactly when it was you worked with me at Mast, but at periods anyway, the band practiced in our basement in Mast.
Okay,
Right,
I
right
didn't know
in
that.
okay, in the big room, when you entered the shop,
Yeah.
there was it was a big room, and there was a room that was equally big right below it in the basement, and that's where all the instruments were set up, and they were practicing on evenings and weekends.
Cool. So, I mean, just to be clear here, Mast is something that existed later than the period we're basically talking
Yeah.
about here. But the Mast as a shop in Malmö, you came in from the corner, and then on the right it was Amiga stuff, and on the left it was laser discs, and then you could
Yeah.
go. The sort of office was straight ahead, and then there was something down below, then, which was, I didn't know, was a practice hall
Yeah,
for
it was
the
mainly
band.
used for storage, but
Yeah.
also practice at times.
Cool. So that's Ivanhoe. And then we had Lancelot, Jimmy. So when I worked, that was in, what was that, 89? When I worked for Datalet in Eslöv, Jimmy was one of my contacts at the distribution company. So he worked at the distribution company, and so we bought our games from them.
Oh, okay.
The company of Philip Diab. Yeah, I should remember the name, or
Yeah,
should I prepare that?
AlphaSoft.
AlphaSoft, thank you. Yes. So that's Lancelot, Jimmy. As far as I know, Jimmy lives in Sundbyberg, so he lives like 5 minutes away from me, and we haven't met since, but we are Facebook friends. So
Yeah, same.
uh,
I
another,
met
yeah.
I met Jimmy when he was in Wasp, and I met him with Roger. So he's the one who introduced me to Jimmy.
And then Stefan is somebody I had beer with a number of times. So King Arthur, Stefan Graffician, lives in Malmö still.
Yeah, he is one of my old friends. I've known him since like I almost said high school, but I meant högstadiet. Somewhere when I was 14, let's say 84 or similar.
Yeah.
And I've known him since then, and he's been a friend. And as everything, friends that are real friends, they come and go. I mean, it can go 5 years between times you talk, and then you talk every week for a year, and you know how it is. But he was a part of my normal friend group in Höllviken, so he's not a part of the computer group. So we've partied a lot as not when I was 14, but later on, because he was part of my normal friend group and playing role-playing games and board games and whatever, everything. So he
I tend
wasn't.
to separate people of so computer friends and friends with computers, and eventually most people kind of grow into friends with computers, where you can hang out and you don't need the computers because they're just your friends. You just have a common interest with them.
Yeah.
And then there are a number of people who you only know because they are doing the same thing as you, but and you wouldn't meet them unless it was in the computer context.
Also, actually, King Arthur had one of the earlier Amiga thousands in Sweden, and boy, were we impressed the first time you saw an Amiga.
Yeah. So and these are the people I know, but just to list a few of the other members, De Bracy, I don't know him. Who was that?
I don't remember his name, but he was actually before my time, if I remember correctly, in Wasp. We only overlap a very short time after I joined Wasp, and he stopped doing stuff. And I actually don't remember his name, and I only met him a few times. So
So he
I can't
cracked
say. I
Seas
can't
of
say much.
Blood, Friday the 13th, and then yeah, so he cracked those two, and then on CSDB there is also something with Toronto Supersoft Express. I guess that is some sort of export to the US. So 2 things for the group. He wasn't. I guess he wasn't one of the more active ones.
No.
And then we have the. I'm sorry to say Frederick and Patrick, but this is actually one of the most ridiculous hacker group names I've heard, and it's Frederick Patrick Cracking Service.
Actually,
So
worse than my CLCC.
by miles. So, and who are they? Are they still active or anything like that?
I'm not really sure if this Frederick was the Frederick from Mast, but I doubt it, and I think this was also before my time in Wasp, because when I joined Wasp, it was pretty much just the guys you know. We were just a handful of people. It was me, King Arthur, Lancelot, and Roger. So it wasn't like others had come and gone and just made minor things, and I really didn't know them very well. Most of them, some of them I didn't even meet. So
right. I mean, it could also be. I mean, these are really early days. So if you had somebody who didn't know anything but had a computer, they could possibly also be in your group without being sort of contributing member to anything that the group actually did. So they were more like friends with the computer. All right, and Mr. UFO, again, somebody I don't really know, or I have no idea who he is. So
I met him, but I can't recall him today. It's like I think I met him like once or something, and again, it's probably before my time in Wasp. So it's another person that I can't comment much on.
right, and then Oase, he doesn't have
and
any.
That's a name I don't even. It doesn't ring any bells whatsoever. Before CSDB and checking up Wasp there, I had never seen the name or heard
okay.
it.
He was, I mean, he was a swapper as well. So I guess that could mean he was just a friend of somebody who sent around the disc. So, and not necessarily introduced to all the others.
Perhaps could very well be like that.
Okay, so I do have 2 additional things. Again, reading CSDB, this Frederick Patrick Cracking Service, there is a reference to Clone Kid, which is a name I recognize also from back in the old days. And then there is Dickendolk, which is Clone Kid spelled, reversed. This Dickendolk, my understanding was that he worked at Compro in Malmö, one of the few shops in the city. Do you have any recollection of anything like this?
Compro was the store at Davidshall, I think, and I had nothing to do with that place at all, because they were the competition. Back then, there only existed 2 places. It was Diskette and Compro, and they were fierce about their competition. It's not like the master days when everyone was friends. You had like 3 computer stores in the same area, and if you didn't have what the customer wanted, you sent them to Datalet or whoever. So it was much friendlier during that period. But I know there were hackers, crackers at Compro, but I don't know any of them, and I don't recall their names. It was like you're trying to block it out.
This is the book I bought at Compro, so I was sort of a Diskette guy because that's where you were. So I'm sorry to say that I was, not. I wasn't always going to your place, but I'm really happy he and I think this was the Dickendolk guy that I actually bought it from.
Yeah, and I know there were others in the vicinity as well. Someone in Lund, and also someone a bit more south. I don't know if it was in Vellinge or just there were a handful of people, but that I perhaps met a few times, since if you worked in a computer store, that's where they came.
Mm.
And I worked at Diskette on the weekends. I was still going to school, but I back then, so I worked at the weekends and sometimes on days off. So I met a lot of those people, but I don't remember their names, their handles, or anything like that. It's those days are a blur.
Yeah, but it gets a bit blurry. I mean, the details sort of escapes you after 30 years. We have to live
Yeah,
with that. So, and so to wrap this up, my understanding was that basically all of these people were local to Malmö, or the like a few dozen kilometers from outside.
yeah.
Nothing outside of that, right?
No, exact. I think there was a few people who did a little bit of mail trading, but it was it's like the reason you could do mail trading already back then is because you had friends in other parts of the country,
Mm.
which you knew before the computer, who had also got a computer, and then you started to trade.
Mm.
But you would never have had that contact if it wasn't your friend before he got the computer.
Yeah.
We all there was no networking back then or anything, so there was some trading, but it was very sparse.
One little extra thing about Wasp then. I am absolutely sure that I have seen something that said we for software protection, not we against software protection. Is that just something I imagined, or have
No,
you heard
it's
anything like that?
yeah. I remember it clearly what it looks like,
Yeah.
and I'm wouldn't be surprised if I have it on my C64 discs, which of course is converted by our nice friend.
Yeah.
So I have and he was thrilled when he got my discs. Because he got so much new releases he never had seen before,
This must be
versions
Hedney,
at
right?
least. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it was a demo or an intro, but I remember clearly that it was like the Wasp logo, but with the made with the character set on the Commodore 64. So it was the lines
Mm.
that you had in the character set, and so it was WASP. And then we had a sprite which was from some game with it wasn't Mario, because Mario wasn't on the 64, but it was some guy with a hammer, and
Yeah.
we had him animated walk into the A and hammer at the end of the A, and that part fell down, so it became WFSP, and then the text appeared: "We for software protection because cracking is fun."
I'm so released. Thank you so much for telling me this. It wasn't like a mad dream I've had when
No,
I was 15 or something. This is actually something that happened. Thank you so much for
yeah,
telling that.
yeah. So it exists, and I remember it very clearly, but I don't remember if I think it was an intro, and it was used in like one game or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was made. But as you hear, it was a very simple intro, a character-based logo with some text below and a stolen sprite animation. So it
That's what
wasn't very.
intros should be. They
Yeah,
shouldn't waste the space. I mean, nowadays when people are adding a demo to a little, a huge demo-like intro to a little game, and where the intro is bigger than the game itself, then I think they missed the point of an intro.
that's why this is really a later part of this thing, but I want to talk about it just very, very quickly here. And that is why one of my favorite parts of the Amiga was doing boot intros,
Yeah.
because those were restricted to 1 kilobyte, and of those 1024 bytes, you needed like 21 to actually boot the disk. So you had 1003 bytes, and here, make an intro on that.
Of course.
That's fun.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
agree. I mean, the artificial limits artificial limits introduced that puts more constraints on you, that gives you something to work with, something to challenge. The more boring part, I'm sorry to say, PC demos are absolutely gorgeous, but when you can just as well just make an MPEG and show it, then the value of doing real-time stuff in constrained environments is sort of not there. Then it's just a work of art, and there is no technical aspect of it.
Exactly. And I remember back in the days on the 64, you would actually, when you were doing stuff like intros or demos or whatever, you would actually sometimes count the clock cycles of each instructions to figure out the best timing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, when doing a number of the effects, you need to write to the register on a very specific, like, char on the computer, or it wouldn't work. I mean, if you're opening the border, as this is broadcasted, I think the previous episode is me explaining a few of the demo effects, and so I would urge you to have a look at that one, and
Yeah.
you can learn a bit on a few of the demo effects on the C64. All right, a number of aspects as well, still getting sort of a sense of what the scene was like. Originals, a number of people worked in computer shops. I guess that was sort of it.
Yeah, usually you borrowed a game. Sometimes you actually made a copy of it in the store, took the copy home and then cracked it. Other times you borrowed the original, made a copy of it at home and then returned the original because the store had a unlimited supply of originals, so you just borrowed everything from there. That's how it started, because it wasn't feasible at that age to keep buying things. I mean,
Basically, it still isn't, given
no,
the cost of originals today. I mean, they were
yeah.
expensive back then, but but there were more of them than there is today. So, and what about demos? Was that a thing? This when intros and demos. The legend is that they started with intros, and then they sort of found their way out of not being associated with the release and became a release of themselves. So, take us back there.
Well, it was, yeah, you're exactly correct about that. The intros got more and more advanced. It's very easy to see. Just look at the releases from early to mid 64 in the 80s. And then, of course, people started to do more things when they were inventing things for their intros. They invented things that didn't fit because there was a whole the goddamn game supposed to be in, because back then everything was, or the majority of the stuff was from tape, and it was then made into one file. So the amount you had to do anything fun with was limited, because you needed the whole game in the file and the intro. But actually, before the real demos started to happen on the 64, there was something that appeared before that was the precursor to demos, and I myself have released a bunch of these that I'm about to mention, and it's music compilations from games. This is what I think is the step that goes from intros and then ends up becoming demos. This is because you started, and if you look at the earlier music compilations, the earliest ones of them just have a pretty basic text interface with the different music, which game it is from, and stuff like that. Then people started to make the music compilations fancier with animations and graphics, and then they evolved that into more and more advanced things, and started to use music that wasn't from games, and instead was made by some friend or some group member. Or I mean, if you look at all the group member lists from the periods of Wasp and similar, no one had a musician. It didn't
No,
exist back then.
no.
Because there was no use. You had use for someone who could make graphics, of course, but why should you need any music? It isn't until much later, because when people had music in their intros, it was always game music, always.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the line is
there was
intro music.
no public music routine that you could use. The only music programs were those where you can type on this strap-on keyboard that sits on top of the on top of the C64. But that's not something you can distribute like separately. It was just something music that worked inside the scope of the program.
Yeah.
At least I'm not aware of any program which you could make some sort of assembly that music you can use from your own routines that would run in machine code.
There was, I don't remember, but there was some kind of simple tracker things, but I don't remember, and I don't think very many used them because they were not good, and they could. I wouldn't be surprised if they were related to the tools the actual musicians who made music for the games used. I mean, someone had to have these things, and I think also someone, of course, this is the hacking business, reversed engineered. I think it was Ocean's sound system, and made a system where you could write a song, you more or less wrote notes, and this thing converted the notes into code, which you could then import or as a add to the Ocean sound player system, because it was that one pointed to some information in the memory, and you just swap that for the other information. I think that's an early tracker system on the 64, but since I was never into making music, I'm not sure how it actually works or who used it, but there were some very few systems like this.
So when I look, I'm just googling a bit on the side here. Soundmonitor by Chris Hulsbeck, that was released in the end of 1986. So and we are
But
talking
that's
about
Amiga, isn't it?
No, Soundmonitor is C64. I think that was the tool, the tracker tool. I really shouldn't say this, but I think it was released in 64, the 64, the German magazine, as a type-in thing.
Yeah, I remember that now.
October 86.
I read that. Yeah, I read that magazine as well. And I know I have a friend who actually made music using the Soundmonitor, but it was pretty crap. I mean, music on the 64 wasn't good in any way. Not compared to what you could do with the Amiga later. Of course, it works for the 64 and it's a classic and I love the sound, but it really wasn't very good. And there was very few people who could actually make good use of it. There are a few very, very good ones and soundtracks from games that you will never forget, but it's still usually not that good.
Yeah, well, the scene didn't really catch up on professional musicians until much later.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move to the next thing, and that would be West Coast Crackers, WCC. So, what happened here? What killed Wasp, and what gave birth to West Coast Crackers, and how did this transition go when you left one and joined the other?
I think actually it's like it just sort of died out more or less, and by then Wasp was pretty much me, King Arthur and Lancelot, and Ivanhoe. Roger didn't do much. He stopped. So it was just us three, and we had contacts with West Coast Crackers for a long time and traded with them, and yeah, well, we just decided to join up with them. I don't remember the reasoning, but it felt like a good idea. A good idea at the time. That's all I can say.
Yeah. And
And
and that meant that Wasp basically fell apart. So the active parts of Wasp joined West Coast Crackers, and Wasp basically died off.
yeah, uh, when we left Wasp, there was no Wasp left.
Right. But so sometimes it's easy to think that Wasp died and West Coast Cracker was formed, but that's the Wasp. Sorry, West Coast Cracker actually existed, right? So you
Yeah,
joined an existing group with a few existing members.
yeah. West Coast Crackers. I don't remember when it was formed, but it was formed before we joined, for sure. Probably not long before, perhaps half a year or something,
Mm.
but it existed before we joined, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, this is a period where half a year is a long time because
Yeah. Back then, the 2 months off you had for summer, I mean, uh, it was like ages. And a year today is like, where did it go?
yeah,
Just passed by.
or a decade.
Yeah.
All right, so and to be honest, if I look at the list of West Coast Cracker members, there are so many I have no idea of. The HJ and Zeb, they have no releases to their names as far as I see from CSDB. Were they like two swapper guys or?
Uh, Seb, I think Seb was one of the original.
Yeah, he's marked as co-organizer. HJ
Yeah,
and Zeb are marked as organizers here. So
yeah. Uh, it actually says Ivanhoe in West Coast Crackers.
yeah,
I don't recall him ever releasing anything. Perhaps we merged, was
yeah.
merged with West Coast Crackers, but Ivanhoe had pretty much already quit. That is very, very possible. Um, but I don't remember HJ and Seb that much. I mainly at the start I had relations I had were mainly with Mr. Ping and number one.
Yeah.
It was those who I talked to at most. And of course, there is a new name in West Coast Crackers, which we haven't talked about earlier because that person wasn't involved in Wasp, and that is, of course, number one.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's sort of a touchy subject because I know he's keen not to be too referenced, but that is the other founding father of Fairlight. So,
Yeah,
talking about Mount Rushmore, there will be a number one, later becoming Strider, and then Christian. So these are the two heads that is in the Fairlight Mount Rushmore.
yeah. And he had some local group, the Thieves or something,
Yeah,
uh, that didn't do very much at all. But he was a close friend of mine before we joined West Coast Crackers, and he was a regular, one of the most regulars on Diskette. That's how we became friends, of course. So he just joined up with us when we joined with West Coast Crackers. Jumped on the same train.
mm.
So that's how he started to get organized into the bigger picture.
And I think it's interesting to also note here that suddenly it's not just Malmö. You had a bunch of people from Kalmar or thereabout, and then you have the Malmö section, and Ping is from Gothenburg, right? So
Yeah. The West Coast Crackers was formed in Gothenburg, and when we joined from Malmo, it was only Gothenburg and us.
okay,
The Kalmar guys, Nike, and
yeah,
I don't remember the names of the others in my head. Was three guys. They came later. They weren't in from the start, or from when we joined anyway.
mm,
They came a bit later, and we always when they joined, we made a bunch of fun of it because I mean, Kalmar is on the East Coast,
Yeah,
so
it's
so
not, it's absolutely not West Coast. It's not describing anything relevant here.
yeah. So when they joined, we talked about just as a joke, but having them as a ECC subdivision or something, because they weren't on the West Coast.
Right. So, and I mean, Janitor later turned to be one of the key crackers in Triad. He lives in the US, as far as I know. Still a
Yeah,
very cool guy.
my bad. Exactly. I confused Janitor and Nike. Nike was one of the originals. Janitor was the one from Kalmar, if I remember.
No.
Nike was also.
Nike is from Kalmar, absolutely. Janitor is
Yeah.
Per.
Yeah. Okay.
So that I mean, two of the really early Triad members would be Janitor and Enixion, Dawn.
Yeah. That's correct. Now I remember.
Because when I worked for Datalet, again, this is about you and not me, but just as a background, Datalet was a computer store that was in Eslöv. Yes. No, it's not Eidslöv, it's Eslöv. Very, very easy to get that wrong. And Nike, we collaborated with him in some way. I think he had sort of a shop in Kalmar, and he bought stuff from our shop, which was a little bit bigger, because he had his activity was too small to justify buying directly from the bigger purchaser, so he bought via us, of course, at the margin.
Yeah.
But I should remember his name, but it escapes me.
Yeah, same. I should remember the names of most of the people I've mentioned, but I think Mr. Pinge's name was Stefan. But
Correct.
yeah, but I mean, this is like 35 years ago. So it gets very muddled up in the head.
And to become very internal, one of my current best friends is Skuggan, and so he's from Klippan or Kvidinge up in the north of Skåne, so still in the vicinity of where we are. And his sister is the girlfriend of Mr. Pinge.
Oh, okay.
So the circle is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Janito, that's Mr. Pinge. They made it sort of big in Triad afterwards, number one, and you made it big in Fairlight after that. And then who else is there to reference from Wasp?
From West Coast Crackers.
From West Coast Crackers.
I'm actually starting to doubt myself. Perhaps West Coast Crackers was actually formed and Wasp merged with another group.
So it says here that, again, CSDB being the source of all knowledge here, West Coast Cracker was formed on the 19th of September 1986.
Yeah, and it says Ivanhoe, founded by, and I remember that it was Ivanhoe who made the original contact, who knew those guys.
Yeah.
So I met them through him, and it's probably, I think it's either a merge between Wasp and something else, or it was just a new bigger group, and we called it, or they called it West Coast Crackers because it was the West Coast. It was Malmö and Gothenburg. So I think it was actually created or merged, and that it didn't exist before this.
Okay, so Mr. Pinge was in the renowned group Swedish Copymasters up until the very day the West Coast Crackers was formed.
Yeah, and the members there is Pinge, Waco, and Seb, at least. I'm not sure where nobody. He wasn't anywhere before West Coast Crackers. And it says on the West Coast Crackers page, Swedish copymasters dissolved when they changed the name into West Coast Crackers. For the full story, read the letter of VCC. So it feels like it was kind of a merge between Swedish copymasters and Wasp. As I said, I'm not 100% sure about anything, but at least I was wrong earlier when I said it existed before we joined.
Yeah. So guys, you've just seen an episode of two guys clicking around CSDB, contemplating over the content and doing wild killgissning. Yeah,
exactly.
Sorry about that. I think we got it rather right, but let's not take poison, as you say in Swedish. Ta gift på någonting. Let's not be 100% sure. And if somebody have opinion or somebody would have an opinion around this, and feel free to comment down below on how your perception is of how it actually was.
Yeah, and I can be wrong, and I blame my bad memory.
Yeah. And anybody know me, I cannot be wrong. That's I know Hedning has that on me, that I say that I'm never wrong, but I've been known to be wrong once, but it later showed that I was right, so that was the only wrong. Yeah, sorry about that. So let's move into a few of the really gems here. A copy party back then was a really small thing, and now, I mean, it grew into thousands of people sitting playing 3D first-person shooters over a network, but that's not where it started. So so the West Coast Cracker and Triad meeting in Gothenburg, how did that go, Christian?
Yeah, this was in December 1987 at Christmas, and it was basically a meetup. We had done one before with in the summer or early autumn. We was just us and the Malmö and the Göteborg West Coast Crackers gang, and then for the Christmas we made a small gathering with the Triad guys from there, and I don't know if they were from Göteborg at the time or where they lived. Anyway, we met up there, and it was great fun. At the start anyway. We saw, just as a fun fact, we played lots and lots of Gauntlet in a small burger place which had that machine. So it cost us a lot of money because Gauntlet was awesome back then. And we also saw, perhaps not the premiere, but pretty early, the film Labyrinth with David Bowie. And that was, of course, great fun because there is something called Lancelot in that film. And that's a teddy bear, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, and Lancelot was with us because he was a part of the West Coast Crackers gang. That's Jimmy. So everyone joked on him all the time after we had seen that part. And then we made some.
Just to make it really short, this is December 86.
86.
We formed Fairlight in 87, or you formed Fairlight in 87.
Exactly, 86.
So this is 86.
Yeah, 86. And we also did some coding, and I think some very easy demo, one Triad and one West Coast Crackers thing was released. And they were still very early basic demos at that time. And Triad had invited some friends, which we didn't know. And they were at the place, and they were computer guys, and we were talking and doing things. And having fun. But we then realized that this was the Swedish cracking crew, which had some kind of hostility with West Coast crackers. So the party feeling kind of died off after that. But it was great until that part anyway.
They were also one of the early days strong forces of the Swedish hacker scene. So
Yeah, and they were. I mean, I have no issues with them today, and it was actually pretty much just one guy. And Swedish cracking crew, it was two brothers and another guy who was at the place with us, and it was always both in there and in demos and stuff like that. It was the younger brother who was the instigator of all the conflicts. So I remember the older guy was, if I remember correctly, he was a very good friend to Ivanhoe actually. But the little guy, not so much. The younger guy.
right. I should have had the names here. I don't have that, but I know I'm a friend with. I think Niklas and if I say Halmstad, does that ring a bell? But they are. I think they are from Halland, so not from Scania, the southern region of Sweden, but and not Gothenburg, but the area in between.
I don't remember where they lived. I mean, stuff like that has just been dropped out of my head because it's not relevant.
Cool. So this is another episode of Killgissningar. So yeah, sorry about that. That is my recollection of it. That they are from Halmstad, or at least somewhere in Halland.
I think the guy you talked about was not one of the brothers. He was one of the other guys, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it doesn't matter. We can stop Kilius.
I think Niklas Ekengren. That is the guy I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and he's not the brothers who named it Tugela.
Okay, so and he's also he's from Varberg, which is, it's not Halmstad, but it's really close, and it's still Halland. So I was still right-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hi Niklas, I hope you're watching this, and if you are, please comment down below on the history of Swedish cracking crew, or we can schedule a talk with you and have the other side of this discussion. That would be good. I'll ping Niklas after this.
Hopefully he will have a better memory of things than I do when it comes to this.
Well, I mean, again, it's 30 plus years ago, so it's the digital rot is there for the disc, and the physical rot is there as well.
Yeah.
I tend to explain my memory as cheese. The holes are getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. There is also one set of things which is a very small copy party, or sort of a meetup between friends, and that is in your parents' house in Höllviken, and we do have a number of pictures of those. So we just hold here for a second and allow Torsten to provide a slideshow, and yeah, we will not go through every picture here, but who were they, the members that were there?
That's the West Coast Crackers gang. It's me and Tony, me number one, me and Lancelot, Mr. Pinge, Nobody, and Nike, I think, are the ones who were at that party, and we were just having fun, and we had both. I think we had someone had an Amiga there as well. I don't remember who, but we had, at least from looking at the pictures, there is one Amiga 1000 at that place. So.
And this was the time when you could party and drink Coca-Cola, and that was it. That was
yeah.
It looks very non-alcoholic, all of it. It doesn't even look like beer.
No, it's no beer. It was Coca-Cola, but as one of the pictures show, we had 3-liter Coca-Cola bottles back then, and there's quite a bunch of those. So, but it was just having fun, drinking cola, eating snacks, whatever. It was nothing serious whatsoever. It was
Yeah,
just a bunch of friends meeting up, having fun.
but I mean, normally when you fiddle with the computer, you sit there and you do your thing before the networks were there. And if you wanted to do that, but you wanted to do it together with others, I mean, exercise your hobby with others, you need to meet up and you bring your heavy equipment to that place. So that's what you do.
Yeah. So it was great fun. And as I said, we had a few meetings like this, but this is the only one we had down in the southern parts. I know we've been to Gothenburg at least 2, but I think 3 times, and met up, all for good fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so Torsten has now also shown the pictures of that. That's great. What? What happened there? Did the tape break or something? We want to keep listening to what Christian had to say. You can't give us that. You can't give us that without kind of continuing. Yes, we can. It's called a cliffhanger. So that was a cliffhanger until next week's episode. And I would like to welcome you back next week, where we continue the story from where we left it off just now. And I would like to thank you for watching this far. So see you next week on Fairlight TV. Bye bye.